Welcome everyone. I thank the medicine community for giving me this opportunity to present some of the ENT topics. I am Vasant Kumar.
This presentation we will be discussing on hearing assessment. Hearing loss, as we know, is one of the major common sensory deficit in ENT. The WHO has estimated around 450 million people to suffer from this hearing loss. It not only affects the older population, but it also affects the younger population and reduces their productivity, not only physically but also financially. So, as an ENT surgeon, we should have a good knowledge and skill in assessing this hearing loss. The whole topic can be divided into three. The first one is detection, whether the patient has any hearing loss or not. Once we detect whether the patient is having any hearing loss, then we have to classify it into conductive deafness, sensory neural deafness, or mixed deafness. The reason behind this classification is all the three types have different ways of management. So it is very essential to classify it once we detect it. After classifying it, we have to quantitate it, whether it is mild, moderate, severe, or profound in nature. There are various ways with which we can assess whether the patient is having hearing loss or not. Starting from the golden days where they used some of the clinical tests like finger friction test, free field hearing, and then comes the tuning fork test, which are being in use for more than 100 years. Then comes the pure tone audiometry, where we can even document the hearing loss, and then some of the tests which test the inner ear like photoacoustic emissions, electrocochleography, and evoked response audiometry. We will be discussing about each and every test in the coming presentation. So before going into the understanding of hearing assessment, we will just go through the physiology of hearing, the basis with which the sound is conducted. As you all know, the ear anatomically consists of the sound conducting system, the outer and the middle ear, and the sound transducing system, which is known as the cochlea. The purpose of the outer ear is to direct sounds onto the tympanic membrane, and the sound vibrations are then transmitted through the middle ear via the ossicular chain before it reaches the cochlea. The cochlea plays an important role in transducing these vibrations into nerve impulses via the auditory nerve, which is then delivered along the central pathways to the auditory cortex, where it is processed and perceived as sound. So, this pathway is termed the air conduction. However, sound can also be transmitted via bone conduction, where the vibrations are transmitted via the skull and delivered directly to the cochlea, which is buried within the temporal bone. There are three ways how this bone conduction takes place. The first one is the distortional bone conduction or the compressional bone conduction. Here, the sound reaching the cochlea causes alternate compression and expansion of the cochlear shell, which is causing a movement of the cochlear fluid. So this movement of the cochlear fluid causes a displacement of the basilar membrane, which leads to changes that results ultimately in the sound. The second one is inertial bone conduction, where when a sound strikes the skull, it sets the skull into vibration. The ossicles in the middle ear lag behind and do not move due to the inertia of the ossicles. This sets up a relative motion between the foot plate of the stapes and the cochlear fluid deep to the oval window, and hence they perceive a sound. The third one is osseo-tympanic bone conduction, where when a sound reaches the skull, the skull starts vibrating, and this sets into vibration the column of air in the external auditory meatus. This vibration of the air column is partially transmitted to the tympanic membrane and from it through the ossicles into the middle ear to the cochlear fluid. We also elicit the history from the patient's side, and a good history can give a clue about the type of the hearing loss and the amount of hearing loss also. Start a normal conversation with the patient and try to elicit the speech discrimination part also. If he is a sensory neural hearing loss, the examiner usually raises his voice so that the patient can hear properly. If the patient is not able to hear the normal conversational voice, then we may conclude that he may have a hearing loss, and then we can proceed with our further investigations. Finger friction test is a very crude test to determine the hearing loss. The examiner stands behind the patient is blindfolded, and then the finger friction is done, and the examiner just snaps and asks the patient whether he is able to hear it. It can test both the ears, but it is a very crude test to jump into any conclusion. The watch test is nothing but placing a clicking watch on either side of the ears, making the patient blindfold us and asking him whether he is able to appreciate the sound. Nowadays, with the digital technology booming around, it's very difficult to find a clicking watch. This is also a very crude form of testing, but yes, they do have their role in some parts of India, not only in India, in the world. The free field testing is tested with the examiner standing 6 meters behind the patient. The examiner utters some single words in the patient's language and asks the patient to repeat them. First, both the ears are tested, and then the other, and then each ear is tested separately. When the left ear is tested, the right ear is placed with a paper and a scratch is done over the paper to give a masked noise so that the right ear doesn't take part in the testing. And then this procedure is repeated to the left ear. When the patient is able to hear the sounds, when he is able to repeat it back correctly, then the test is taken normal. If the patient doesn't, then the examiner moves 1 meter ahead. Likewise, he moves 1 meter ahead, and then he goes just behind the patient when the patient is having a very severe hearing loss. We test both the conversational voice and whispering sounds. This test is used widely in the armed forces during the recruitment process. Various tuning forks are used for testing. Tuning forks were designed not for primarily to be used in ENT practice. They were used for tuning the musical instruments. That's why the name tuning fork came. John Shore invented this tuning fork, and it is basically used to tune the piano and other musical instruments in the frequencies. The tuning forks comes in various frequencies, and the most commonly which we use in ENT practice falls between 128 to 2048 Hz. The tuning fork usually has a foot plate, stem, base, shoulder, and the tines. The most commonly used tuning fork is 512 Hz because in clinical practice, this frequency provides the best balance of time of tone decay and tactile vibration. Lower frequency tuning forks like the 256 Hz tuning fork provide greater tactile vibration. In other words, they are better felt than heard. Higher frequency tuning forks, for example the 1024 Hz tuning fork, have a shorter tone decay time. Hence, 512 Hz is preferred because it lies in the range of speech frequency and it produces less overtones. The tuning fork test is usually done in a very quiet room and a verbal consent should be taken prior to perform this test. The patient should be clearly instructed what he has to do and what he is not to, so that there is no misinterpretation of the test. There are various types of tuning fork tests which we clinically do, starting from the Rinne's, the Weber's, Schwabach's test, absolute bone conduction test, Bink's test, Gillies test, Stenger's test. The other tuning fork test also, but these are the one which is commonly performed. The tuning fork has to be handled in a proper manner. The tuning fork should be held by the stem between the thumb and the first finger, and it should be strike the tines one third of the way from the free end of the prong onto a firm but an elastic object like the clinician's elbow, or you can even use a rubber pad. This will produce a relatively pure tone. Avoid striking the tines onto a hard surface as this may damage the tuning fork and produce multiple overtones. Rennie's test was proposed by Heinrich Adolf Rennie in 1855. The air conduction is compared with the bone conduction of the same year. There are two ways of doing the Rennie's test. The base of the vibrating tuning fork is placed firmly over the mastoid process and the patient is asked to indicate when sound disappears. If the patient says the sound has disappeared, then the tuning fork is put near the external auditory meatus along the axis, acoustic axis of the tuning fork, and then asked whether the patient is able to hear the sound. If the patient is still able to hear the sound, then air conduction is greater than bone conduction. The other modified way of doing the Rennie test is strike the tuning fork and place the tuning fork along the external auditory meatus and ask the patient whether he hears the sound, and then put the footplate of the tuning fork over the mastoid of the same ear and ask the patient whether he is able to appreciate the sound. If the sound through the air conduction is better than the bone conduction, then it is normal. We usually ask the patient to compare the first sound and the second sound. If the patient says the first sound is better, then air conduction is better than bone conduction. If the second sound is better, then bone conduction is better than air conduction. So in Rennie positive, usually takes place in a normal ear where air conduction is greater than bone conduction. The red one is the air conduction, the green one is the bone conduction. So this is the normal ear where we do it and we find air conduction is greater than bone conduction. So what happens in a conductive deafness? The conductive pathway is defective and hence the air conduction is decreased, whereas the bone conduction stays normal. So here when we check, the bone conduction will be greater than air conduction. So in conductive deafness, bone conduction will be heard more than the air conduction. What happens in sensory neural deafness? In sensory neural deafness, the pathology lies in the neural part, where both air conduction and bone conduction impulses are taken by the nerve, and hence, since the nerve is the defective part, both air conduction and bone conduction are reduced, but still the air conduction will be greater than bone conduction. Here, we are not measuring the intensity of it, but we are just comparing the air conduction and bone conduction, and hence we get a normal RINI in sensory neural hearing loss. So we call it as RINI positive. When one ear has unilateral sensory neural deafness in severe intensity, when we are checking the bone conduction here, then the conduction is taken to the normal ear, and hence the patient will observe the bone conduction is more than the air conduction. Actually, he is hearing from the other side. So that's where we false negative RENI in unilateral severe SNHL. A properly done RENI test can distinguish a conductive hearing loss with an airborne gap of around 30 decibels. The next test is the Weber's test. Usually, some clinicians prefer to do the Weber test first and then to do the RENI's test. It can be done either way. In Weber's test, we compare the bone conduction on both the ears. In RENI's test, we compare it with only the same ear. Here, we compare it with both the ears. We compare the bone conduction with both the ears. So, place the vibrating tuning fork on the vertex. The other common sites which can be used are the midline of the forehead, bridge of the nose, or chin, which is usually equidistant from both the ears. These vibrations will be conducted through the skull and reach the cochlea. Ask the patient whether it is heard loudest in either one side or the midline. That is, ask him whether the sound is louder in your right ear, left ear, or the middle. So, in conductive deafness, the sound will be heard louder on the affected ear, whereas in sensory neural deafness, the sound will be louder in the normal ear. A small graphical representation will clear your doubts. As before, the red is the air conduction, green is the bone conduction. So here in normal patient, both the normal ears have normal air conduction and bone conduction, hence the Weber is centralized. In conductive deafness, the air conduction is decreased and the bone conduction stays normal, and this is the normal ear. And here, since the bone conduction is normal and the air conduction is decreased, a bit of masking from the environmental noise is less, and hence the bone conduction seems to hear more and effective. Hence, the Weber is lateralized to the affected side. Whereas in conductive deafness, as all you know, the air conduction and bone conduction both are reduced here. Since the bone conduction is reduced, the bone conduction of the normal side is more. Here, the RENI will be lateralized to the normal side. In conductive deafness, remember the bone conduction is not affected. Both normal and the affected ear have the same amount of bone conduction, but due to the air conduction which has reduced on the affected side, that prevents masking of the environmental noise, and hence the bone conduction is very much appreciated onto the affected ear. Hope you understand this. So the explanation for Weber's test lies with two effects. One is the masking effect, the other is the occlusion effect. In masking effect, the sound heard via the affected ear has less environmental noise reaching the cochlea via the air conduction as compared to the unaffected ear, which receives sounds from both bone conduction and air conduction. Therefore, the affected ear is more sensitive to bone conducted sound. In occlusion effect, most of the sound transmitted via bone conduction travels through to the cochlea. However, some of the low frequency sounds dissipate out of the canal, a conductive hearing loss. In other words, when an occlusion is present, will therefore prevent external dissipation of these frequencies and lead to increased cochlear stimulation and increased loudness in the affected ear. So a properly conducted Weber's test can determine a difference of 5 decibels between each ear in terms of bone conduction thresholds at the frequency being tested. There are various clinical uses of this Weber test. In the primary care setting, it is useful to use the Weber test along with Rennie test to help the clinician differentiate between conductive hearing loss with a sensory neural hearing loss. This will guide the clinician to the need for further examination, investigation, and management. In the post-op setting, the test is commonly used as a quick bedside test for examining a complication of a dead ear. The Weber and Rennie test can be used to confirm audiometric findings, particularly when the audiogram is not consistent with clinical findings. The other uses in the assessment of a patient with bilateral conductive hearing loss, the Weber test is a quick and useful test for the ENT surgeon to help determine which side of the ear to operate on first. Usually, the ear with the most significant conductive hearing loss is preferred. Schwabach's test was once popular but no longer in use today. It compares patient's hearing sensitivity with that of an examiner, provided the examiner has a normal hearing. It tests the bone conduction of the patient and the examiner and compares them. The fork is set into vibration and then placed over the mastoid process of the patient and asks the patient to inform whenever he fails to hear the sound. Once the sound fades, then the patient tells that he is not able to hear the sound, and then the foot plate of the tuning fork is placed over the examiner's mastoid and then tested. If the examiner is, a, is able to hear the sound still, then the bone conduction of the patient is less and reduced. If the examiner doesn't hear the sound, then it is taken that both patient and examiner have the same bone conduction intensity so that it is normal. Absolute bone conduction test is nothing but a modification of Schwabach's test. Here, the patient's bone conduction is compared with that of the examiner as in Schwabach's test, but the EAC external auditory meatus is occluded by pressing the tragus inwards to prevent the ambient noise entering through the air conduction route. So this gives a better perception of the bone conduction. So here the inference lies the same. If the patient, if the examiner is able to hear the sound after it has faded from the patient's side, then the bone conduction of the patient is reduced. Bing test was proposed by Albert Bing and it is the test of bone conduction. Here it examines the effect of occlusion of the ear canal on hearing. The vibrating tuning fork is placed on the mastoid while the examiner alternatively closes and opens the ear canal by pressing the tragus inwards. In normal or sensorineural hearing loss, the patient hears louder when the canal is occluded and softer when the canal is open, which is Bing positive. Whereas in conductive hearing loss, patients will appreciate no change, which is Bing's negative. Gillis test tests the bone conduction. It examines the effect of increased air pressure in the ear canal. It is performed by putting the vibrating tuning fork onto the mastoid and by increasing the pressure in the external auditory canal with a Seagull speculum. It pushes the tympanic membrane and the ossicles inwards, raises the intralabyrinthine pressure, and causes immobility of basilar membrane and hence decreased hearing. But there is no change in hearing when the ossicles are fixed. So, Gillis test is negative when ossicular chain is fixed in case of otosclerosis or disconnected ossicles. It is positive in normal patients and in sensorineural hearing loss. This test is replaced now by tympanometry. Malingering is very common these days with many work compensation acts. Lots of concessions are given to physically challenged that for hearing loss patients these days. So it is our duty to ensure that these incentives reach the deserving people and not to the malingerers. So there are many tests which are devised with the tuning forks which test the malingering. The few among them are Stenger's test, Thiel's test, and the Chimany-Moose test. Stenger's test is based on the principle of Stenger's phenomenon, where when a listener is presented with the same type of sound in both the ears, he will hear a single sound, that too only in the ear which it is louder. That is, when a patient is presented with two sounds, that is one louder sound and the other lesser than that, to two ears simultaneously, the ear which is presented with the louder sound only hears. So, for example, we take that this patient is malingering that he is not able to hear on the left side. So we place a tuning fork of same frequencies, vibrate it, and place it at an equidistant from both the sides. Then the patient will say that he is able to hear from the right side because he is malingering on the left side. And then get the tuning fork on the malingering side closer. Now the patient will be able to hear only in the left ear, he won't be able to hear on the right side. But since he is feigning on the left side, he will commit that he is not able to hear the sound. Whereas if he is a genuine patient with a hearing loss on this left side, then he will be still able to hear at least the right side tuning fork. Team test is done when a vibrating tuning fork is applied over the mastered process of the deaf ear. Then the patient accepts to hear it. Then the patient is blindfolded and with a non-vibrating fork on the mastered process of the deaf ear, the malingering patient claims to hear the sound still. So it is just a trick to fool the patient and just elicit the test. Chimany-Moose test is actually a modification of Weber's test. When the vibrating fork is placed on the vertex, the patient indicates that he hears it in the good ear and not in the deaf ear. The meatus of the good ear is then occluded. A genuine deaf patient will still be able to lateralize the sound to the good ear, whereas as a malingerer will deny hearing the sound at all. So, you the better way to experience these tuning fork tests is to do it to yourself. You test it on your ears so that you will be having a better understanding of all these tuning fork tests. So before you ask me any doubt, I would give you a riddle or a question. Put your answers in the comment box and I will reply it back. The first one is, you can use only one tuning fork and you can place it only one time on the patient. But you should be able to say which ear is abnormal ear and You can even find which type of hearing loss the patient is suffering from. I repeat it, you can use only one tuning fork and you can place it only one time on the patient. So, put your answers in the comment box and I would love to answer them. Any doubts and queries regarding this topic, you can contact me or you can write it in the comment box and I will answer you. I kept the presentation very briefly so that I don't want to make you fatigue by giving a long presentation. We will be back with the other presentation on pure tone audiometry. Thank you for your patient listening. Stay